Your host, Chris Swick, here from the depths of darkness to the light of success. This podcast is brought to you by Ellis Original and Compass 9 Media, my sponsors. Today, I have a great guest with me, Mark Caravaggio from Guelph. Want to let the audience know a little bit about yourself, Mark, please, and thank you. And thanks for having you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. So I am currently an entrepreneur, which is something I grew into. I'm from Guelph, Ontario, Canada. I run a DJ business, and I'm incredibly passionate about health and wellness, both physically and mentally, which I hope we'll dive into. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll take it in a direction that you could lead, because I don't want to talk too much about my entire life, but anything you'd like to know, just shoot.
So we'll start around the beginning there. So what was it like? Were you born and raised in Guelph, Ontario? And what was your childhood like growing up?
Oh boy, that's a loaded question. Yeah, born and raised in Guelph, and yeah, had a really fun childhood, full of skating, typical Canadian fashion, right? Going out, playing hockey on the outdoor rinks, on a long winter's day, that kind of thing. So lots of great memories from then, and kind of living a typical family life in that regard. And then that led up until when my mom left my dad when I was around 7 years old, which, took a whole other turn. Okay. And, I'm sure we'll dive a little bit more into that. But yeah, so, a lot of people have gone through these kind of experiences, but, maybe have dealt with them in different ways. But up to that point, I would say a very typical kind of childhood.
Yeah. So let's dive right into that then. So what was it like mentally on you when your mom just up and left your family?
I've done a lot of reading on this and counseling and such. And I feel like when I look back at that age, because, we have selective memories, don't we? I'll look back and certain things really appeal to me from my childhood, and other negative memories come from certain moments of that. But, as far as I know, when I look back, I embraced the move just because it was an unhealthy situation. I could see that even at 7 years old. It wasn't
abusive towards you guys or your father? Was it lots of verbal arguments and stuff? Or?
A lot of verbal abuse, especially, and
towards you or towards your father?
Towards everyone.
Okay.
Especially my mom. And he was raised in a very typical Italian kind of household, right, where the father,
was the breadwinner, and
the breadwinner or supposed breadwinner, depending on the situation, right? That pressure is there to bring in the bread, and the wife does everything else, kind of thing, right? So, my mom was at that time worked at the old St. Joseph's Hospital in Guelph, and she's a nurse, and so shift work, right? So you could imagine working nights and afternoons and days, and then coming home and have to deal with raising two kids and doing all the cooking and cleaning. A lot of pressure on a marriage, right? Yeah. So, but when it came to the abuse, it was that was a situation where if that did bleed into, us, my mom wasn't going to have a situation where we were, continually being impacted into our, teenage years.
Okay. So let me get this straight. So your mom left with you guys, or did your mom leave the marriage total? Like, you picked you guys up and left the marriage?
I very distinctly remember, actually, it was kind of like, my brother and me, it's kind of like, Nick, Mark, let's go, we're out. I very distinctly remember that moment. And it's something that she kind of made a pact with herself. If it got to that stage where it was negatively impacting, us.
Yeah. Your everyday life and stuff.
Yeah. Then she was going to try and create a better life for us. And that's what she did, which was the hard way, really. It was a harder way to go about it, but
And so how did your dad take that then? Did that not go over too well, or?
Oh boy. Yeah, that's not a good situation, and anyone that comes from that kind of Mediterranean, that Italian, like that background, it can, those fiery personalities where jealousy.
It can get heated. I have lots of friends that are Italian and Greek and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I had some of that handed to me from my dad. So I fully understand that where it can go from 0 to 100, just like that. So there was a lot of things I witnessed post my mom leaving, that you know, are firmly in my memory. But yeah, it wasn't a great scenario. You know,
For
it
sure.
wasn't for a good number of years after that, especially.
Okay. So after those years, did you see your dad on a regular basis, you and your brother and stuff like that? And how was that after they had split up?
Well, my brother's 4 years older than me, so
Okay.
you know, quite different in the sense of how we handled that scenario, right? So at 7 years old, I was looking for a father figure, you
For
know, and
sure.
so, you know, when my mom eventually had someone else in her life, and you know, who eventually became my stepdad at that time, I was kind of like, you know, come here, daddy, you know, like I
Give
was
me
all
all the
about,
attention, give me that
yeah,
attention that you were seeking, eh?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, or
exactly.
missing, I
So
guess.
where my brother kind of went in a little bit of a different direction, and not good or bad, it's just different ages and how you're handling that. He was preteen, right? So he was going into those teenage years, hanging out with his friends, and just different, you know, ways that you're exploring your life, right?
For sure. So after your mom and dad split up there, did your relationship become better? Were you have a closer bond with your mom then after that because this fighting had subsided and stuff, or?
I would say that, like, when I think back, my immediate thought was I felt safer.
Okay.
That was
You
kind of
you
my
didn't feel
immediate thing.
safe yourself around all this stuff that was
No,
happening, erupting in the household and stuff,
no,
eh?
no. That's
Like, were
the
you
kind of the
scared
big.
to go home from school some days?
I don't recall that, if I'm
Okay.
completely honest, being
Yeah.
afraid to go home, but that fear was definitely, you know, coming out of me as the years went on into my teenage years and on. It was definitely a big part of my relationship with my dad and how that came out. But I think at that young age, I don't think I was able to understand what I might have been feeling. But I
Yeah.
think there would have been a lot of fear, but I don't, when I think back to, you know, 5, 6, 7 years old, I'm
Yeah,
sure
for
there
sure.
was a lot of, you know, yeah, being afraid, but
Yeah.
I don't I don't really recall until I, you know, got more into my teenage years and how my relationship with my dad was impacted, and really the rest of my life and
Okay.
other relationships, you know.
So like walk us through your teenage years then. Like how was it going through your teenage years then? Like you said there was an impact down the road with your dad and stuff like that. Um
So the interesting thing, I mean, I would say, you know, kind of post my mom leaving, it was a scenario where, you know, it was survival mode, I would say. And I think my mom would admit to that as well. You know, she's working shift work at the hospital, trying to raise us, you know, using babysitters wherever possible. And she's
yeah.
trying to make a better life for herself as well.
So
So it
your
was,
dad wasn't the one watching you while she was working, eh?
there was scenarios like I did go to stay with my dad, but that
Yeah.
was that was up and down, you know, like that was
Okay.
something that I fought.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go, but then my mom wanted us to have that relationship, and I feel like a lot of kids would have went through this exact same scenario, in the sense of, you know, you have a mom that left the dad, and the dad isn't, you know, reaching out saying, "Come and be, you know, a huge part of my life. I
He
want you
wasn't
to."
trying to reach out at the time, I guess, eh?
It's just that thing, right? Where when someone leaves you, and you know, there's a bit of that anger and resentment, you know, towards the ex, and the kids unfortunately get the, you know,
You're more like the pawns in the relationship then
yeah, which is
almost.
a very common, you know,
Oh, it's very common. I've
yeah,
seen it in my exes, my relationships with my exes
yeah,
too, and stuff like that.
yeah,
And
for sure.
it's not fair to the kids though, in the end though either.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And so I didn't really understand, you know, I'd go and see my dad here and there on the weekends, that kind of thing. My brother did his own thing because he was firmly into his teenage years by then. But, you know, for me, it actually wasn't until really after high school that it really started to come out, and you know, how that was impacting, you know, other areas of my life, you know.
okay, well, like, maybe you could walk us through a little bit of that. Like after high school, then did you go to college, post secondary education, or anything, or?
I did, but the funny thing was, and I'm sure a lot of high school kids, you know, maybe even today can relate to this, but you know, literally the last day of high school, I finished. The next morning, might have even been the night of the last day of high school.
Yeah,
Guess who picks up the phone but my dad? And
you
he
called
says,
him,
"No,
or?
no, he called me."
Oh, he picked it up to call you. Okay, okay.
And you know, knowing that I was graduating from high school, knowing that I didn't really have, you know, I was 17 years old, right? I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do with my life.
Yeah.
I might have been aware of some part of my skill set, but I was just far too young to understand what I truly wanted out of life at that point. And so he called me and basically said, you know, what are you doing? You know, come and work with me at the store that he ran. And
Oh,
the
he ran
next
his own business?
own business, and
Okay.
he invited me, and you know, you know, that was the next day, literally the next day after I
Going
graduated from
right from
high
high
school.
school to working full
Yeah,
time, eh?
working full time, dealing with, you know, more of an adult driven retail environment. And so that was interesting, but I didn't really, you know, going back, you know, if I hadn't known what I was getting myself into as far as putting myself in the line of fire of dealing with my dad and the impact he had on my life back to childhood, wow, it's pretty powerful, you
You
know.
probably wouldn't have went that route, is what you're saying?
I definitely don't regret anything, and I learned
Okay.
an incredible amount. And I feel like a lot of where I've gotten to today was from, you know, you know, and I think anyone can say that, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
look
for
back
sure.
on your life, and everything's kind of a stepping stone to your next, you know, the next phase of your life, if you will. And my life was always very much built on phases, it seemed, and that was about a 3-year phase of my life post high school, working
So
for my
post
dad.
high school, you went out and just started working with your dad for a
Yeah,
few years there
three
before you
years.
decided what you wanted to do?
Yeah, and that ended in really a tumultuous kind of leaving, if I'm honest. And this is kind of where things really started to come to the surface with the relationship, you know. Um,
What was the final straw to have that tumultuous, end?
um, you know, a lot of times what happened in that business was
If you don't mind me asking, what kind of business was it? Then I have an understanding, I guess.
it's a sewing machine business.
Okay, okay. Like fixing and like retail, sort of selling them and stuff.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, what would happen was there would be patterns that would be recreated over and over again. And so something where, if I think back to certain scenarios, there would be something that would be some sort of a conflict. It didn't have to be a conflict, but in my dad's eyes it might have been a conflict. So he was upset with something, and
Yeah.
if I was in the line of fire, I'd get the
You get the shitty end of the stick sort of thing.
right. So I kind of, you know, felt like a victim in that business, you know, when I was working there, in the sense of these patterns would get created. I would be in the line of fire, and I felt like not an employee, but like, why are you treating me like your son in the business? I just wanted to be treated as an employee. But,
For
you know,
sure.
really, you know, this is how it is with, I'm sure, a lot of family businesses, but this kept getting recreated, and it just kind of pounded over and over the
Sort
fact.
of probably made you feel belittled almost then, eh?
Yeah, there was a lot of belittling, and this was building up inside of me this entire 3 years, so that the
Yeah.
fear started to grow. Because the problem is, you know, it really, you know, came to the surface that, you know, I had a hard time standing up to my dad, and I knew this came back to, you know, all the way back to childhood, and I just couldn't do it, because I knew if I did stand up for myself, he would blow a gasket, and the anger and the rage would come out of
It
him, and
could become physical then and stuff.
it could have been anything. And I
Yeah,
knew that no good was ever going to come from that, but
for sure.
these things would happen over and over, and this just built up. You know, a lot of people can relate to that, building and building and
Yeah,
building.
yeah. I
And
can too
so,
as well with my father growing up, and like no hard feelings with him now. Like my
yeah,
parents are still together and stuff, but like we butt heads. My mom still says today, Chris, you and your father are fucking too much alike.
yeah,
That's why we always
yeah,
butt heads all the time. Like I'll even
yeah,
go work with him with his business, and after about 15, 20 minutes, we've had enough, man.
yeah. Well, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so really the actual end part of the journey working at the store really was not any different than all of these other patterns that I've been going into. I can't even remember what the situation was, but it was a very similar pattern. But
Yeah.
at that time, the stress just overwhelmed me, and for the first time in my life, I had a panic attack.
Oh, wow.
And
And so what was it like that first panic attack? Like, did this happen at the store or were you
at
at
the
home?
store, it was
Okay.
at the store, and
Did
it
it
was me
almost
and
just
my
like
dad.
overtake you, eh?
Me and my dad got into it, and there would have been one or two other people in the store. It's a small business, so maybe
Yeah.
one or two people, but he was the main person that saw this, and I think it probably threw him off. He would have never seen anything exactly like that. But yeah, it's kind of like a little bit of an out of body experience where,
For sure.
you know, the stress takes over you. And I just basically broke down in a rage of crying my eyes out. And actually the interesting thing, for the first time in my life, words started coming out of my mouth towards my dad, interesting enough, which
Like ones
was
that like telling them how you were feeling in that moment,
from
sort of thing.
childhood kind of experiences that
Okay.
I learned later in counseling were things that I was holding inside of me that I wasn't dealing with.
Yeah,
And
you just
all of
kept
these,
burying them down. Like, would you
yeah,
bury these things down or feelings down with drugs or alcohol over the years, like in
no,
your teenage years? No.
no, no, it
Okay.
wasn't like that. It
Yeah.
wasn't like that. I probably talked to my mom a lot about things, but
Okay.
with him directly, there was no conversation surrounding, you know,
So
any
anything with him,
growth
it
out
would
of
just
that.
get buried and buried
Correct.
more and more, and the more layers put on top of it, sort of thing, eh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is going back to what you were saying about that kind of the public persecution, right? The demeaning, and that is just kind of pounding me down a little bit more. And
Making you feel
it just
worthless,
left you.
basically.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
all about that self-worth, right? So, it's something that came to the surface, and it drove me out of the store to, like, physically. I remember calling my mom right away and saying, I don't know what's happening. I was panicked. I lost it. Right. So
Yeah.
I basically said, come pick me up. And my mom came and picked me up. And really at that point, it was kind of just managing me trying to sleep and get to where I can live some sort of a normal life and
Yeah.
understand what was going on.
So at that point, that's where all the anxiety attacks basically
Yeah.
started, eh?
Yeah.
And then
Uh,
how did you proceed after that? Like, was that your last day at the store when this all happened?
yeah. So there was probably a couple of weeks there where I'd wake up and just kind of play it day by day. And
Yeah.
I was not feeling better. Like, I could see that there was something uncomfortable in me happening. And so I was just trying to understand that. And, I didn't know what to do. And I was kind of, I was working in a store that was my full-time job. And then it wasn't there. So I didn't know what to do. And of course my dad was regularly calling because he took this very personal. He didn't understand what was going on. And
Yeah.
to be honest, I didn't know what was going on. I was only 17.
For sure.
Well, actually, at the time when I had that, I would have been like 19, 20.
Yeah.
But yeah. So really, it was just managing that for the first little while. There was maybe 1 or 2 days. I remember one particular day going back into the store just to kind of see how it was. And that was more of my dad pushing to get me, oh, just come back to the store. Everything will be better.
Yeah.
That was kind of his approach. Right. But I remember sitting in the store, like really like a depressed kid, sitting there with my head down. I very distinctly remember that. And I knew something wasn't
And
right.
you just felt
And
afraid almost, it sounds like.
I
Like
just didn't know what it was. Like,
yeah.
something wasn't right. And I knew it was directly with the relationship with my dad, but I just didn't know, what to do. And this really led to then getting counseling and going down the road of understanding more about how I'm going to manage this, and you know, almost distance myself from my father before I understood more about how I can manage my, anxiety at that
So
time.
at that point you decided to take a step away from your father and not
Yeah.
talk to him for a little while then?
Yeah, because what was happening is all the time that I was away from the store, my dad was calling and calling. I remember him calling very regularly.
Yeah. Did
I
you
would
ask him to stop that and just leave you be,
no,
like give you
to
some distance?
well, I'd have to check with my mom, but I
Yeah.
remember him talking, really like calling my mom directly a lot because I wasn't
Okay.
answering the phone. Because what would happen if I heard his voice, just hearing his voice would trigger me and get me
Yeah.
back into that kind of panic mode. So I had to actually avoid hearing his voice altogether.
Oh
It
wow.
was pretty scary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no
So,
doubt. It sounds really scary.
and if I remember correctly, that went on for about 6 months. Like, I literally could not hear the sound of his voice. So I realized how serious it was. Like, as far as this wasn't just a little,
Little
something.
blip in the
This
road
was,
sort of thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So at
So
this point, did you decide to seek out like outside help, like counseling or
yeah,
therapists and stuff like that?
yeah.
Is
So then
that
I started to see a counselor, and this is where, this was a series of appointments, and
yeah.
I can't remember how many, but I went for, probably weekly visits there for a good number of months, I would say,
Yeah.
until I kind of got to the point where, this is the direction I had to take,
Okay. And then so what direction did you take after that? Is that when you decided, all right, I'm gonna find something I like and go to college or university?
Yeah, there was that. But I think what allowed me to go in that direction was, the counselor ultimately said, without going into all of the details,
Yeah.
the counselor ultimately said, look, you have control over you. Your dad was raised in an environment which didn't promote giving you the love that you need.
Yeah.
And you're looking for a certain type of love from your dad that unfortunately he is not able to give you.
It
So i
was
had i
able.
had to let go of the idea of, because I'd always say things to my dad, or I was always looking for something from him, and he was never able to give me what I wanted. So it's just coming to that realization, he was who he was.
It's not going to happen, and you got to
Yeah.
accept it. You had to come to
So
the
the counselor basically said, you've come to the fork in the road. You can either accept whatever relationship you want to have with your dad, even if it's more surface level, and
Yeah.
accept him as your dad, and that's who he is, or not. Like, don't have a relationship at all. And that was an option, but I decided ultimately just to accept whatever I was going to get from him. And that really paved the way, really for the whole rest of my life, stopping to search for that,
You
thing.
basically had that out of the way now. Now you could focus on what you
Yeah.
needed to do to be successful in your life now, eh?
Yeah. And I was able to go back to him and tell him to his face, look, you're not going to get from me what you're looking for me, which I felt he was looking for me to take over his business.
Yeah, and
And
that's
kind
not
of,
what you were wanting, eh?
maybe at the time, when I was 17, 18, when I started in the business, maybe I thought this was a possibility,
Yeah.
but as I realized as we got more into it, and the health of our relationship wasn't, was jeopardized.
Yeah.
That became more of the focal point, and taking care of myself. And that led me ultimately to going down more of a college path and choosing something I was a little bit more, you know, aligned with, I guess.
And what was that you decided to choose?
So I ended up going to a college in London took a course called Business Information Systems. So this was getting into the mid to late 90s, right? We're getting closer to that year 2000 where it's,
Yeah.
you know, I was a real business guy. Like, I had that in me from my father naturally, but it was, so I was a people person and have that business structure. But, with computers coming, we were close to that internet age, right? So I was really drawn to kind of the evolution of where we were going as a society from an information technology standpoint. So I was really drawn to that. So it was kind of that combination of, bettering my business skills and honing my craft in that regard, but then mixing that with more the information technology age. So
Okay, so like the internet and all that stuff, and like what you could sort of do with your business
yeah,
online and stuff
yeah,
like that, networking and
yeah.
yeah. And so is that after that, is that when you got into the business that you have today? Or did you go,
Not
or
even
did
close, actually. Not
no?
even close. Yeah, because the business I have today was something that came way down the road after that. But
Oh wow.
yeah, really after that, you know, I was led in a direction in my kind of first real major part of my career out of college, was really back to the core of where I'm built, which is helping others, you know. And I ended up getting into a role where I was a corporate software trainer. And so, yes, business, teaching, education, computer technology, that kind of thing. But
Yeah,
at
you
the
really
end of it,
liked computers and stuff at that time, eh? Or you
yeah,
always have?
yeah. But it was really more of utilizing my soft skills, if you will, in helping others, rather
Yeah.
than more of the technical side of where one might get to. So yeah, that's really where my career path started after college, was getting into a corporate software training position.
Nice. So did you get that right after college or?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. And then like down the road, how long down the road did you start your new business then and stuff like that?
So really, that corporate software training would have went over the course of about 12 years
Oh wow.
altogether. Yeah. So,
That's crazy.
um, yeah.
So you
And,
really didn't start the business that you're into today to later on in life in your
oh
30s.
yeah, really around 2006.
Oh
So
wow.
I would DJ on the side and have
Well,
some
how
fun
did you
with
get
that. It
into
was more of a
DJing and
hobby.
stuff like that as a hobby?
Well, the thing is like with anyone, you kind of have certain passions in life and certain
For sure.
hobbies. And when it comes to arts, I mean, some people have photography, some people have music, and, collecting or drawing. There's different arts to get into, and for
For
me,
sure.
music was always a massive passion. And
Like just
the
listening to different music genres and stuff like that.
yeah, I mean, music just in general, I was always drawn to music, right? All different
Yeah,
types of music. And but really, as I got more into adulthood, it became more of an interesting hobby where I could not. It's not just about the DJing aspect of it. It was more about the you know helping to plan parties, more theme parties, and putting together playlists. This is back when it's a little bit different now, right? With the
for sure.
streaming lists and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Then it was more, you had to really put the hardcore effort into, going through records or going through CDs and really
Now you just got to
thinking,
click a couple damn buttons.
yeah, it's a lot different, right? A lot of
Yeah,
playlists are put together for you on Spotify and such. So it's a little bit of a different approach. So, it was really, it became a passion of how all of these things fit together.
for sure.
The
And do you
the
find
fun of
that
putting.
that college course you took really helped you build the business you have today? Do you think
I
that
think
played a role?
I think everything in life, you know, kind of leads to your next step, if you will. It's
Yeah.
interesting. It's interesting because the corporate software training, the big part of that was public speaking,
Oh, you
which
did lots of that, eh?
that's what you do. So you go into a classroom and you've got
Oh,
a
okay.
class and you're teaching, and public speaking was always my number one fear, interestingly enough. So it's kind of funny how
Funny,
that.
mine is too. Like I don't I love sitting behind this microphone and stuff, but I put me up in front of a crowd in front of people is a little different though. But it's funny. Like I
Yeah.
have no fear behind this microphone and stuff because I guess you're on the other side. It might even be different, once this whole pandemic ends and stuff like that. But just,
Yeah.
but yeah,
So the interesting part that I tie to that is, a big part of being a wedding DJ is you need to put yourself out of your comfort zone to entertain guests, right? And one part
yeah.
of doing that is becoming an MC. So you're hosting the celebration essentially.
Oh,
And
you
for
do the
me,
emceeing at the weddings and
it's a
everything.
big, it's a big part of what we do. And
That's
so,
awesome.
for me, when I got more into the wedding side of things, this is something where I had to put myself outside of my comfort zone. And so I
You
kind
got
of
vulnerable.
took to that, teaching skill that I had honed that craft and brought that in. So even though it's two really separate career paths altogether, very much they were related in the sense of how I was putting myself outside my comfort zone and for the betterment of the business.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. And then I remember you talking a while ago when we were at a function that you had gone down a little path to find yourself again and stuff like that. Can you enlighten everyone on that?
Where would you like to begin with that?
Well, what
uh,
brought you to that point? That you're like, all right, I got to find myself again. Basically, well, that's basically the way I remember the conversation. It's not the way it went, but that's what
yeah.
I gathered the gist of it. Like you sort of just started, dug deep and really found yourself like a whole new life. Changed your mindset on a lot of things and stuff like that. So, like, what was that you did?
So I think everyone that is an entrepreneur can relate to the fact that you have to give up a lot in order to build a business. And
Yeah, you
I
have to
think
give
in
up lots of
general,
your like social life, everything. Like you got to
yeah,
really focus on that business to keep it going.
yeah. And so, as I had a vision in what I wanted from building this business. And in order to do that, and it's one of those things, you don't know exactly how many sacrifices you're going to make until you're in the thick of it and you realize, wow, this is a lot different, than I thought it was going to be. But no turning back, it's kind of I'm in. So,
You're
you
in
know,
full force, eh? Head first, feet first, whatever you want to call it.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
So, for me, part of that sacrifice ended up being my health. And it was really not something that it was so much in the forefront. I realized how it was affecting certain relationships in my life, but I didn't really think so much about the impact on my health until much later in the building of my business, to be
So
honest
what
with
was
you.
happening with your health at this point?
Well, the obvious one was gaining weight. So like the
Okay.
physical health, I wasn't keeping myself in physical shape in that
Just
way.
eating unhealthy and all that
Yeah,
kind of stuff.
when I think back, it was just really a culmination of everything. I wasn't eating right. I wasn't exercising properly. I wasn't, really in touch with how mental health impacts, the daily relationships that you have with every single person that come into your life. And so, if I backtrack, not even talking about the mental side of things,
Yeah.
kind of, I had an epiphany back in, I remember it very distinctly. This was at the end of 2016. I took my mom to Mexico for a Christmas time trip. And we
Okay.
were away, and I'll never forget it. And everyone has different things that impact them. For me, it was taking off my shirt and being on the beach, being at the pool. I felt out of my depth. And I'm not saying it's anything to do with my weight necessarily, but I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. At that
Okay.
time, maybe I felt like it was something to do with my
Was
physical
this
health.
just slowly starting to creep up where you weren't feeling comfortable in your own skin at this
Oh,
point?
this was
Or
happening for a while. And this was
okay.
kind of like the culmination of something isn't right. And then when
Yeah.
I got back from that trip, and I think, sometimes you go away on a trip and you're away from your day-to-day life, and you have these epiphanies, right? The light bulbs go off
Yeah,
because you're
yeah.
not thinking about the stresses of, your day-to-day life. And so for me, it was that my head became clear. And I realized when I came back from that trip in at the beginning of January of 2017, I had to make some changes in my life. And so at that time, what happened is I was following um, uh, an online weight management coach.
Okay.
And so at that time, I knew of him and I followed him, and he was a mentor of mine. But at that time, he was just setting up an online system,
Okay.
essentially. And they were programs that you could register to and follow. And
And sort of
yeah,
gave you what you needed to do day to day.
yeah. And
Okay.
so I had the opportunity to go on in a podcast and personally ask him, what would you recommend would be best for me? And I was thankful that he was able to answer the question that I was looking for. And I went on this 12-week program from January of 2017 to April of 2017. And interestingly enough, I had already booked a trip to Cuba in the middle of April 2017. So it was kind of like a deadline. I'm like, well, I guess I got to get to the end of this, 12-week program, because I'm
We're
going on
doing it,
this
eh?
trip
You're
right
full
after.
force in on this one now.
Yeah. So this was really a daily program for 12 weeks straight. And that one changed my life for sure. That really changed my life. And I really follow this program still to this day.
Oh, you do, eh?
Not in the sense of like a 12-week program. You
Yeah.
can go on this program anytime. But that program was really a lifestyle change. And that allowed me then to lead my life in a little bit of a different direction.
So this is
In
what
this,
today you build your life around now, like around your exercising and
yeah, yeah,
eating stuff.
yeah, exactly. Um, so that was really the beginning of, I needed to make some major changes in my life. And so that was, like I said, 2017. And then this went all the way up until last year. So let's say 2 years on,
What was it doing with your mental health? If we can backtrack just a little, I remember you touched a little bit about that. Like,
mm,
how was it affecting your mental health when you were building this business of yours and stuff like that you have today? Like the relationships and mental health. Like, what do you mean? What happened with those relationships and stuff like that? I guess.
so are you meaning leading up
Yeah,
to
leading
going
up to
on that
when
program?
yeah, leading up to
Yeah.
that program, you had mentioned it was sort of ruining some relationships for you and affecting your mental health and stuff like that. And you didn't realize that lots of these things that were happening were the cause of it, sort of thing.
Yeah. I think at that time it felt normal because I had a dream and I was chasing that dream, and, you
Were you
know,
sort of running on autopilot then almost?
there's a bit of that. The way I explain it to people is I didn't have any boundaries. I
Yeah.
literally would meet clients any day of the week, anytime, 24 hours, 7 days a week. I didn't
Take
have any
calls, whatever you
boundaries.
wanted, eh?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
any relationships I had at that time, like I distinctly remember like dating and having relationships where the girl would say, like when she had her first inkling that my life was a bit different than your average, person, it's kind of like, oh, okay. So that's what your life is like. And it's
Yeah.
and I was like, yeah, I mean, like you're either in or you're out, like
That was your attitude at the time, eh?
I was hell bent on, this is my dream and I'm building that. You can come along for the ride, but you know, don't take me away from my vision and my, you know, mindset towards what I want.
Yeah, which is almost a selfish act in a sense. Like, although you're trying to build this business, but someone else is trying to have a relationship with you, but you're not even giving them the time of day. It was your business and nothing else, basically, it sounds like, eh?
I lost balance. I lost balance of my entire life. So as soon as something else came into my life, like a girl, that's something already on top of a chaotic schedule. And I was just trying to survive at that time, right? So anything over and above that, my business would trump everything else. So it was just difficult. I didn't understand how to manage my life. And, but the interesting part is when I got into that 12-week program, and, this was great, but, moving forward, it still didn't solve all my issues, because that did help with the nutrition side and the physical fitness of side. So it kept me in a good state, but,
and we all know that exercise and eating healthy does actually help with your mental health. Well, tenfold in my opinion, with depression, anxiety, I've had friends that, they don't deal with depression, anxiety anymore once they started working out and stuff like that. And I'm sure you found that as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So like fast forward then, like a little bit then after that April trip to Cuba, you said it still hadn't fixed everything for you.
And the reason I know it didn't fix everything. And that's kind of the red flag right there, if we use that terminology, fixing, right? Because if we feel the need that we need to fix something when we're not really broken in the first place, that's kind of the first, side of things. So for me, it was kind of, I believe I had that mentality that I needed to fix something in my life because I felt like certain things weren't quite right.
Maybe we'll use the word change.
Yeah.
Does that sound better?
But I think at that time, it's not bad. Like, cause at that time in my life, I believe that's how I felt, is that I needed to fix, and that's what led me in that direction. Right. So it's today's maybe a different approach, but at that time, very much it was that, like, I needed to fix this because something isn't right, and, getting to the bottom of it. But so, really, one thing that didn't change moving forward was there was still scenarios, I'll say, that happened in my life, which would come out related to the emotional side of me, I will say, so where if there's any type of conflict, so similar to what I was mentioning before about my father and how if there was conflict coming up and how so this kind of thing would happen with me as well, where there was conflict maybe that would come up in my life, and
like not with your father, but with other individuals.
Yeah, it could be anybody. It could be anybody. Could have been my dad, but it could have been anybody. And when this would come out, the term that, people commonly use now is getting triggered, then it was how I was reacting to these, situations. And so, whether it's business or personal life, relationships, these things hadn't changed regardless of now how I was taking care of myself from a physical and from my nutrition and my physical front. That part in my approach to life hadn't been, fixed, if you will.
Yeah.
So, fast forward to 2019, I would say that 2019, and it's so interesting, and I don't know about you, Chris, but I've had a lot of conversations about 2019 with individuals, and this could be, average people, like you and I, or like professionals. And I've had so many people say that 2019 was such a strange year. And I mean, I'm saying that right now during a pandemic, that 2019 was such a strange year. Like people will say 2020 forever was the strangest year, but
with all the things that have gone on so far in 2020, I wish we could just rewind it and start over, but we can't do that. But why would you say 2019? You said 2019 is a strange year as well as others.
A lot of people.
The
way that I classify 2019 for me, I keep saying it was my best and worst year ever. My best and my worst year ever. Everything.
Yeah.
My best and worst year ever.
Well, let's start with the worst. Why was it the worst?
It was the worst because the worst side of me was repeatedly coming out in relationships. So people that I care about in my life, my relationship was with them. There was
deteriorating.
it's not that the relationship was necessarily deteriorating, but there was scenarios that were repeating themselves where there was something coming to the surface,
Like
you
by
know,
your actions, you mean?
by my actions.
Okay.
Basically, I was easily triggered, and I was seeing this over and over again, these patterns of behavior where I was getting triggered and I would react in a certain pattern. And it was happening not once or twice, it was happening over and over and over again. And it got to happen so many times. And the common scenario that I noticed is this was different people it was happening to. It wasn't just one person. That's
Yeah.
how I knew to take a step back. And I was like, you know what? Like, what is the common denominator here? And that's me.
Yeah,
You
for
know,
sure.
like if I'm reacting,
You got
yeah,
to start with you first, because that's
I
the
mean,
problem
yeah,
usually.
yeah, because I mean, you know, I really always had that mentality where if there was that conflict
Would you
and
usually
there's,
blame others than yourself at first?
yeah, I mean, this is
Yeah.
this is something that I witnessed my whole, you know, childhood life, you know, and
Yeah.
so
So even
this
this
is a,
actions last year stem back to your childhood again,
oh
eh?
yeah, big time, big time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did you do to change all that then? Like,
So you know, it's so funny. Like everyone is different, and
yeah.
this is why I love life, you know. But everyone,
Well, everyone has their own personal journey for sure.
yeah. And you know, as I said earlier in our conversation, you know, I've always had very interesting phases in my life. So I'll go through a certain phase, and then this will happen, and then I'll go through this phase, and this will happen.
Yeah.
So I went through this phase after I went on that, you know, health and wellness journey in 2017. So that led all the way up to 2019. And then 2019, these repeated patterns were happening. Now it's
Now,
important
were
to
people
note,
pointing out these things to you, or were you just noticing it over and over? Were people saying things to you after a while?
there was certain people that would say things to me, but it wasn't necessarily obvious to me at first. But when
Okay.
I look back at
They'd sort
some
of
of the things,
indirectly say something to you.
yeah, or like
Yeah.
when I would go back to have a conversation, certain, I would say a common theme would come out. And
Okay.
the common theme I would say that would come out is they didn't want to disappoint me. In other words, I was looking for something from that person in my life, and I would expect something in return. And if I didn't get it the way that I built up in my head, whatever that
You'd sort of
was,
be an asshole to them.
to sum it up, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
know exactly what you're saying. Like
yeah,
I would
that,
do the same thing in my life too. Like I would you know, if I did something for you, you got to do something in return, you know,
yeah,
or vice versa. Or, hey, I bought the beer last week, or I bought the, you know, I'm
yeah,
going to go back to my active addiction. I bought the drugs last week, you know, why
yeah,
can't you buy this week? You know, it never would happen.
yeah,
And then it would just start a freaking whirlwind of a thing. And I'd get angry, and it usually turned to violence sometimes, you know, and stuff
yeah,
like that. Like I
yeah,
was expecting something in return. So now I don't expect anything in return now. You know, I just do stuff out of the goodness of my heart.
yeah,
And you know what I
which is
mean?
beautiful,
Yeah.
yeah. So, you know, and I didn't realize at that time that that was an important part of my journey, you know, to what you were just talking about, right? So,
For sure.
you know, getting to the bottom of this was just, you know, understanding what is the common denominator here. I don't want to keep living in this pain, and something needs to change. And so luckily I have it in me that, you know, similar to what I did in 2017, if I've had enough of my own bullshit, I'm going to stand up and take accountability for
And
that.
no one would co-sign it anymore for you, eh?
Yeah. And, you know, I'll make steps towards what I think will make my life, you know, a better experience. And so, you know, everything that I went through previously kind of led me to that. And so I went through a bunch of these patterns in 2019, and I find it quite a blessing that, you know, this pattern was happening so often. Now, this pattern, it's interesting to note, this pattern is something that I'd had many times in my life, but just in 2019, it was coming out over and over and over again.
Yeah.
I'm talking like over the course of a few months, over and over, like one after the next.
Yeah, the hamster wheel just kept spinning, eh?
Oh, it was nonstop. It was
Yeah.
insane. And so the way I look at it is the universe was pointing me to a direction of, Mark, you know, look at yourself. There's something going on here. This is your chance to stand up and take accountability for your own actions, you know? So,
For sure.
so
And that's
I
what we
remember,
got to do these days.
yeah. Yeah. So, you know, as I had often done in my life, I'd call my mom and I'd have a conversation. The interesting thing is I would always reach to my mom try and get to the bottom of, it's not necessarily looking for answers from my mom, but I'd always call her in search of something. Like, why is this, she didn't always have the answers for me, but it's just kind of, it was that comfort, right? I always kind of did that. And it was interesting through this conversation, it came out, it led to, different books that she had read in the past and different things. And it led me down a path of, have I given you this book in the past, or have I given you that book in the past? And I was then searching in my closet, for these books that I had stashed away.
Shit, it's there, eh?
Sure enough, right? So there was multiple of these books, these self-help books, that I immediately was looking for an answer, right? And for me, I was kind of like, I was willing to do everything in my power to help anywhere.
This is almost your rock bottom in a sense. Yeah.
That's why I say it's kind of the best and the worst year of my life, because if you do feel like it's that kind of rock bottom and you feel so bad about what you're doing to others, you want to bring back, that resonance of joy to kind of bring that back.
Well, then it's time to take a step back and, all right, what the fuck do I need to do?
Yeah.
And people will see the change, just do the work, and you don't have to go out there to prove anyone. You just move in silence, I find, and people do eventually see the change in you, or the good that's coming out of you. I find that myself, especially, doing this podcast and stuff like that. People see the change. I get compliments or messages, wake up every morning now and stuff, just because I feel like I'm helping others. If I can just be a voice for others, or everyone has a story. Everyone's story is valuable. Like, I had a conversation with someone the other day. It doesn't matter if you're a fucking celebrity or you're a homeless guy. All our stories are the same. They're all valuable, and we're all fucking human.
Yeah.
So
I couldn't agree more.
Exactly. So, and what was that book that your mom had given you and you'd buried in your closet?
There was actually multiple books, but the very first book that I was referring to, that she had referred to, and there was multiple ones after that, but that very first one was actually called Codependent No More. This is a very famous book by Melody Beattie. Very, very popular and best-selling book.
I'll have to check it out.
It's an incredible book. But, when you look at the title, Codependent No More, I never, in that term, if anyone's not familiar or use that term, codependent or codependency, this is something that I had to get comfortable with, because
why don't
I realized
you explain to them what codependency is, Mark?
Well,
or in your version.
The way that I sum it up, if I was to sum up the most powerful part of that book, which helped me, is I realized a lot of the pain that I had in relationships, especially in romantic, in intimate relationships, is I was giving my power away. So what I mean by that is that, that example that I gave earlier about I'd expect something.
Yeah.
And when I didn't get that in return, I'd react in anger or blame or whatever. So it's that same kind of scenario. You're setting yourself,
react negatively, not positively.
Yeah. Which was something that, I learned from a young age. Right. And I witnessed, and I didn't realize that that was happening, right? It was just a pattern of behavior that was happening, right? And it really came down to, I was giving my power away and attaching myself to conditional love as opposed to unconditional love. So,
you're basically seeking attention is what it was.
Yeah. I was looking for a codependent style of love.
Basically someone to co-sign everything you did.
Yeah,
almost.
co-sign. Yeah, that's basically what it is, right? So I'd find someone that I thought was good for me, and I'd attach myself to them in a certain way, in a certain approach that I thought was how I was supposed to do it. But I'd always end up in a pattern of, negative impact from that, and what I realized, what I was doing is I'd set myself up for disaster, because I'd put more of my power over to that person. In other words, I'd stop any boundaries that I had for my own self with my own life. In other words, I wasn't bringing any self-love to myself. I was waiting for that person to come into my life. And when they did, it was like, wow, you're in my life to save me. I'm going to go and give half of myself to you, and you can take all of it. And when they didn't give that to me, because they were maybe respecting their own boundaries and not giving me everything that I was wanting to, I would implode.
Yeah, and it's happened in lots of relationships, even myself too. Like
Yeah.
until you really love yourself, you can't love someone else, man. I find.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
have to start with you, the
That's it.
inners of you, and then you can work your way out and start channeling your love to everyone else. But first, you got to love yourself first. And I've found over the years now, and over
Yeah.
especially over the last 5 6 months for myself personally too. Like
Yeah.
you really got to start with you. Even though I'm in a relationship and stuff like that, But and if I don't love myself, I can't love that other person that loves me too. And
Yeah.
I can channel my energies elsewhere, but I just got to start with me. So every day I wake up and, it's all about Chris in the morning, man. And not in a bad way. I just, you have to do that self-care every day. I find I have a routine now. What about you?
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very much so.
Yeah,
Routine, especially with this pandemic, has been crucial to have a routine.
for
Not
sure.
not
What
maybe
do
as
you do
tight of
to
a
stay positive and everything,
yeah, I mean, not like, to be honest with you, as an entrepreneur, and I work from home as well. This is
Yeah.
really my home office that you're watching right now. And for me, I usually have quite a tight routine in the sense of I'm a list guy, right? So I'll kind of carve out my day, which is very important for me to be efficient with my time. But
Now,
now
do
I'm
you
a little bit
prioritize that list?
very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the one thing that I learned for myself is to kind of blurb everything out the night before onto paper that's in my head, all the shit that's in my head.
Get it out
Because
before you go to bed, eh?
yeah, because it's not just about the work stuff, it's all the other stuff, right? Somebody comes, oh, I had a terrible day, this person came into my life and they said this to me, and all that shit's in your head.
For sure.
So for me, like,
So
I learned that,
journaling, you do lots of journaling?
yeah, journaling, it's really a form of journaling, right? So what I'll do
Yeah.
is, because I always had issues with sleeping as well, all attached to this stuff that we're talking about. So just getting everything out on paper. But then the morning of my day, I'll wake up and I'll have a very distinct approach to my everyday, where it'll lead me to making a list from all of that stuff I got on paper, in order of priority sequence with times attached to it. And
Yeah.
so
And
what
now
I'll do is I'll mix my personal and business stuff into the same list. It's just as
okay.
important as each other to me.
So now you don't push yourself to get that whole list done through the day, or
No,
do you,
hell no.
if there's, say 4 things left at the bottom, do you just carry it over to the next day sort of thing?
Yeah. I
And
view
then
it
that's what
very
you have to do.
similar.
I find
Yeah.
I personally do a list of 6 things and I prioritize them. And I think I've been doing this for about 3.5 months or so now. And I
Yeah.
have yet to finish that fucking list of six.
Well,
Because
if you
and I
want to
carry
take
the
it to
things
the
over.
yeah, I mean,
Sorry,
if you
go
want
on.
to take it to the next level, if you
Yeah.
look at the goals that you set for the entire year, I like to look at having a word. A lot of people have a word. This is my word this year. That's almost like a trendy thing.
Okay.
I've done that the past couple of years, where I'll have a word that I'll live by, and this is something that I use as
What's
kind
this
of
year's word, Mark?
as a theme. Uh, interesting enough, vulnerable,
Nice. I like that one. I like that one.
which
So are you
fits.
practicing being more vulnerable, like to others and in general?
I'm here, right?
Exactly. I love it.
For me, just based on the journey that I've kind of gone through over the past year, it's kind of led me to a natural kind of organic state of vulnerability. And I had a lot of vulnerabilities in me before, but only, I would say, half of me. The true authentic nature of what I provide and what I'm giving to others
Yeah.
really came out last year. That's the work that I had to do. And that's where you need to get to where, you're providing, you need to be comfortable in your own skin, right? Which is becoming, you need to grow up emotionally, basically. Right. And so
For sure. And
once,
mature in that way.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that to me is where you're becoming extremely comfortable in your own skin. And that's where the comfort level comes in sharing what you've been through, because a lot of people are going through the same thing, right? A lot.
Exactly. And it's just a
Yeah.
matter of becoming comfortable in your own skin and making yourself vulnerable, and I find if you make yourself vulnerable, it's just gets easier and easier each time that you talk about something.
Yeah. For me,
So
it's natural. And I'll be honest with you, if I go back to that Codependent No More book, that book, I remember very distinctly when it talked about how, you know, basically how people give their power away, and how
yeah, yeah,
it was a common theme in a lot of people's lives. Once I realized that this isn't personal to me, this is common. I mean, there's books written about this. Once I
Okay.
understood that this is something that I could release and grow and become a better person from that. In other words, yes, accept myself for who I am, but I can change if I don't like that side of my life. I can grow and become a better person and become more comfortable. I don't have to give my power away. Wow, did I ever release a lot of burden and poison from my body?
Yeah.
Like it literally, you know what I compare it to is like Michael Clark Duncan in the Green Mile. When he's releasing all that, all the stuff's coming out of his mouth. He's got all that poison and he's releasing it.
Yeah.
It's like that. Like I didn't realize the anxiety I was walking around with, and it was just coming out of me.
Now, how today now, like the day we're speaking of, like how do you cope in a positive way now with all these things that you've learned over the time now, over the last couple of years? Do you have
It's
positive ways to cope with these things?
Yeah, so it was a journey for me. So that book kind of set me on a path of major, major, major self growth. And so that journey then became of spending, starting last summer, I'd say I dedicated, 2 to 3 hours every single day to my personal
Development?
and emotional growth. Yeah, as a person. And so, reading has become a huge part of my life.
For sure.
Um,
And not just random stuff, like you mean more self-help things or anything
all
really?
Yeah, eh, you know for me, self-help is my major focus, and I'll read and watch other areas of things, but for me it's kind of like if it's not in my life to allow me to grow, I'm not really interested in it.
And same with me
So
too. I'm reading a book too right now on self-image called Psycho-Cybernetics. And if you haven't read that one, by Maxwell Maltz.
okay.
He's a plastic surgeon from the 50s and 60s, but he wrote this book on self-image. It's called Psycho-Cybernetics, so it's really good. But it's one of
Interesting.
those books that you don't just read front to back. It's you study this fucking thing
Right.
paragraph by paragraph. And I've learned, like, I'm literally on page 20. I got it for my birthday a month and a half ago. So
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah, certainly sounds interesting.
it is
The book list is ridiculous that that I have going,
for
so I
sure.
appreciate the other
I'll have
book.
to bounce some off you later.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
But
get
yeah, I
some
mean,
from you.
but really getting to where I was now was a journey. So it started with that book, and then I read and read and read and read, and it became a whole new journey. And what ended up happening is I went to get a numerology reading actually last year. Have you ever had?
No, what is that?
So basically, there's a woman in Guelph here, Lindsay Knight. She runs the Ninth Vibration, and she's a wonderful person
Is
and,
it
and
like a
so
medium
interesting.
almost, or a psychic medium, or what medium,
It,
whatever you call those guys?
in a way, I kind of say it was the most amazing counseling session I've ever had in my life. That's what I say. And I've been to a lot of counseling in my life.
Yeah, yeah.
Basically, what it is it's you go in and there's numbers attached to your birth date and your parents' birth date and years of your life, where you could have been impacted, on an emotional level, physical level, uh, spiritual level in different ways. And what it did for me, I had no idea. She just said, come and I'll do your reading kind of thing. And she had me crying within 5 minutes, so
Wow.
basically what she did for me, the way I can describe it is she makes you take accountability for your struggles in your life. And this is why I always, people joke about the struggle is real. I always say, when you allow your struggles to come to the forefront and take accountability for where you struggle in your life, that's where you really become vulnerable. And that's where, when I went to see her and she highlighted, because I was already on this self-help journey, but what she allowed me to do is to really take accountability for the path that I was on and highlight some of the key areas where I needed to continue my growth. And she
So
led me
that probably
down
helped you point you in a better direction than you
yeah.
were already going, eh?
Yeah. And what she actually did, she recommended a book to me, which really changed my life. And this was called The Presence Process. And this has actually become my Bible. And I've recommended this book probably to 30 people, I would say, since I've
Nice.
read it. And a lot of
So
people have been
who's the
helped by
author of
this
that one?
book. This is Michael Brown.
Okay, and that's the presence process?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. it's an incredible journey that Michael Brown himself was on, and I won't give it away, but it's basically a way for you to change your outlook on life. And for me, it went more down a spiritual path, so once I started taking accountability for my life, this really allowed me to start letting shit go that I was holding on to.
Yeah.
And the major part that came from that was studying meditation.
Okay, so you started getting really into the meditation and stuff like that?
Yeah, so this was a 10-week journey, the President's Process. And so when she recommended this book, I'm just like, yeah, order it up. Again, I'm the type of personality that if it's going to better me as a person,
Let's
and I
do
felt
this.
like that was, yeah. And so, of course, once you start reading the book, it says you'll be meditating every day, and, there's not going to be any drinking and all this. So for 10 weeks, right? So this changed my life because I never thought about it. It's just like, I'm making myself vulnerable to whatever I'm going to get from this process. And because I allowed myself to do that, I wasn't judging the process. I just allowed myself to be put in that position to help me grow. And it changed my life because of that.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, like from where you started in the beginning of our story to now, like it changed you 180 degrees, it seems like.
Yeah. Just the fact that I'm here talking to you about it, I mean, says something to me.
You're saying maybe a few years ago, this would have never been happening, eh?
I might have talked, but it would have been half real, I would say. And the other half would have been a bit of
bullshit.
And it's not bullshit that I would have been aware of, though, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So this is why I don't judge people on whatever they're going through, because everyone has stuff that they're dealing with, but a lot of times they're just not aware of what they're going through.
No, and some people just don't know how to deal with it, or and don't have the resources to as well, or whatever, and that's where I'm grateful every day that I have a roof over my head and a fridge full of food where other people aren't, and it pisses me off when people put down those other people and stuff like that, because we're all human, and then at the end of the day, like I've said before,
that's it. Yeah, it's all about the gratefulness.
Yes, for sure, Mark, for sure. So why don't I give the audience 3 positive things that they could take away from you? What are the 3 positive things that you do on a daily to keep yourself going?
So the very first thing for me starts with your sleep. Now, this might not be in any order. It might be different for anything. But
this is your journey, so this is what you do, and maybe people can learn from it and get something.
That's it. Yeah, and so for me, sleep is number one. And I've went down all sorts of journeys in my life: mental, spiritual, physical. And even when my physical journey was on point, I was going to the gym all the time, working out, I was eating good, I lost weight, whatever it is. There's many times in my life where that was on, but then my sleep was a disaster, right? And to me, that when your sleep isn't on, that's a key indication that something is maybe out of whack, And for different people, that might be different things, because some people might say I have insomnia, and some people will say, well, my mind races, I can't shut down, which I always did, by the way, and I don't anymore. But for me, it starts with that, because if I have a good sleep, then I can wake up in the morning, I have a completely different mind shift towards how I'm going to accomplish that day. So for example, last night, I went to bed, I woke up, and, literally as the sun was rising, and this is a beautiful thing, when you wake up to that naturally and you realize, I got a good sleep, I'm going to accomplish this day for, what I want to get out of it. Right. So I first of all, just don't judge anything. It allows me to kind of set the tone for a good day. So having a good sleep allows me to go to the next level of where I want to go in my day. And, and that next level is always, for me, I grab a glass of water, like a pint of water kind of thing, and just kind of start to rehydrate my body and go into my meditation. So I like to.
How long do you meditate for every morning usually?
When I started in the Presence Process, they had recommended 15 minutes as part of that journey. So that was kind of my baseline approach.
Okay.
And
what do you recommend people to start out at? 15 minutes?
Well, what I always found with that, Chris, which is interesting, because I didn't do meditation before that. I had no idea. I had to learn, just like anyone else that's never been through it before. So for me, I kind of use that as a baseline approach, use that 10 weeks to kind of learn and kind of hone meditation for how that was working for me. And so, you know, for me, it was always around that 15 minutes on that journey. But since then, I stopped timing it. I'm not kind of tying myself to any specific time, because for me, it's all about the organic process. So for me, it's just waking up, going into that meditative mode. And sometimes it might be 15 minutes. Sometimes it might be 20. Sometimes it might be a half an hour. But I'd
Yeah.
say for me, on average, it's about 20 minutes.
Okay. And
If I was
that's what
to,
I'm
it's
doing
just a
right now.
natural.
About 15
Yeah.
minutes, 20 minutes in the morning. And, you know, I really enjoy it. It just really refreshes me, you know, when I wake up and stuff like that. And then I can go on and I have a clearer mind. I find I have more clarity for the day.
Yeah. For me, because, you know, going back to all these little anxieties and things that I've always dealt with in my life, and it sounds like you've kind of dealt with some of that same, you know, things. I didn't realize I was walking around with a lot of that. So, you know, and I never really looked at meditation as something that was about breathing. Like at the end of the day, that's really what it's about, is learning how to
Yeah.
breathe in a way that's releasing pain and releasing the shit that you're holding on to,
And just
you know?
relaxes you.
Yeah. And so you can do it at the end of the day, or beginning and the end of the day. There's a lot of different ways to do it. But for me, setting yourself up, setting your day up with that, you know, in such a positive mind shift, just to know that anyone or anything that's coming into my life, especially now during this pandemic, I'm not going to be affected. I'm not going to go off track because I feel calm. I feel ready, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, going from the sleep into that calm meditative state. And then I might go into breakfast or grab a coffee and read right into my reading.
Nice.
Absolutely essential. Those three things every day for me
Yeah,
before
even
this
my
is,
mentor too. Same thing. I usually do about a half hour reading every morning.
yeah,
You know, on what I'm reading or what book I'm reading, or sometimes I'll read at night. Like I like biographies, so I'll read some
yeah,
biographies. I'm all about knowledge too.
yeah. And so, and what you're reading, I mean, like for me, the book I'm reading right now is called The Choice. And oh my goodness, like this is a book everybody needs to read. It's an unreal book, and it's about this Holocaust survivor, and she's now, I think, 92 years old. And you know, Oprah's interviewed her multiple times. She's an
Wow.
unbelievable woman. But you could imagine, you know, losing your parents in the
Yeah.
Holocaust. You never got to say goodbye, and you know, your family's torn apart, but you survived this horrible time, and you know, you've come to now a time where you can help others, not just dealing with your trauma, but you're now in a state where you're helping others, and it's just beautiful. So I love to read stories like this, because it just reminds me that, you know, we've got it easy in comparison to a
For
lot of other
sure.
people,
For sure.
you know. So
That's
yeah, those
amazing,
will
man.
be the three things for me, you know, which is nothing to do with work, right? Sleep and meditation
Yeah, it's all
and
personal. You start with personal,
reading.
then you get into the
Yeah.
rest of your day, sort of thing, eh?
Yeah, because it's all related, right? It's
Yeah,
all
yeah.
it's all related. That mind shift goes to, it allows me to grow and become a better person, which then bleeds into everyone who comes into my life and everything that happens in that day, you know? So
Yeah, that's amazing, Mark.
yeah.
Well, we're almost to the end here. I got a few questions, just random questions I ask everyone I have on. So
Yeah.
just fun, spice it up a little.
Let's
Anyways,
hear it.
first one is, what's your go-to order at your favorite hometown restaurant?
For me, it would be some sort of Asian or Asian fusion. So it would be like Thai's my favorite food. So like a
Nice.
good pad Thai
Do you
or
have a good
a
Thai
good
restaurant?
red curry.
Good Thai restaurant in town?
There's numerous Thai restaurants, but
What's your
I actually
favorite one?
I'm trying to remember the name of the Thai restaurant. Maybe you have to help me out here. I'm trying to remember the name.
That's okay. He
Um,
likes pad Thai, guys.
I'm a good pad Thai guy, you know. Yeah.
What do you wish you had known when you first started out, like that you know today, but you didn't know back then?
Like back then being a kid.
Well, no, like when you started getting into this, like, you know, when you started this journey, I guess, not way back to when you're a kid, like when you started the journey with your business and stuff
Oh,
like that.
that I have a choice.
Amazing.
I have a choice. So everything that I do in my life, I have a choice. I can be what I want to be, and I can control my own destiny. I can choose what I want. And that was very power, it comes back to that accountability, right? Like I realize that I can release the burden of holding on to all of this anxiety. I don't have to live with that, all the trauma from childhood. I don't have to walk around with all of that. That's not my burden.
Sure. No, it's not. It's not your shit to deal with.
No.
So what are you curious about right now in this instance?
What am I curious about? This is anything in life?
Yeah, anything.
What am I curious about? I am curious about how, as a society, we're going to thrive post-pandemic. It's absolutely fascinating to me, just because I see, right? It's quite polarizing what you see coming out right now.
For sure, even myself too, like with what I do outside of this podcast, like in sales and stuff too, like I don't know what the hell's going to happen yet either. So I'm curious to see if I'll be selling cars from my living room.
That's it. Yeah.
And is there anything I should have asked but didn't?
I would say, you know, for me, I guess the big thing is I always welcome people asking about my passions, you know, because I run a
Well, what is your passions then, Mark? Tell them.
Well, because a lot of people know about my DJ business.
Yeah.
You know, and this is something that, like, if I see somebody out in the grocery store, they're like, oh, it looks on social media, it looks like you're doing great. But all they really know is, you know, my life is kind of this bubble of running a wedding DJ.
I only know DJ Charlie.
But, you know, for me, I traveled the world for 4 years. Traveling's a huge passion of mine. And
where's your favorite place to go? Or where?
Well, Thailand is definitely one of those. And Thailand is where I fell in love with Thai food.
Oh, you've been there? Eh?
I've been there, I think, 4 times.
Wow. Yeah, my brother went for 6 weeks a couple of years ago. He said it was absolutely amazing.
Yeah. It's an incredible country, easy to travel, amazing food, amazing people.
And lots of partying, my brother said.
Yeah. It's just fun. Like, you can have whatever type of vacation that you want.
Yeah, that's what he said. They did Airbnbs and and they flew to the different country or different cities around there. It was just easier than taking the bus or whatever. So
that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing, man. Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today, Mark.
It's my pleasure. Appreciate you having me. It's my honor, honestly.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Spread the good word, eh?
Yeah.